Western Reserve University School of Medicine in Cleveland, Ohio. This is All Access Med School Admissions. Hello again, everybody. I'm your host, Christian Essman, and thank you for joining me again today for another episode talking about a medical school and giving you all kinds of tips and advice and going through some listener questions. I want to thank everybody that's been sending in questions. Don't forget, you can send those to allaccess@case.edu. That helps me put together a show and compile some questions to answer here with my guests that I have on. And I also want to remind people, too, to check out the show site because I will post resources that people might discuss during the episode or they have recommendations. And so I don't want you to think you have to remember them during the show. So I post them to the website, the show site, so you can go back and check those out after you listen to the podcast. So that web address is case.edu/medicine/episodes. So you can also find the archived episodes there as well. So give that a quick look. Just to give you an idea of what's coming up down the road, who's coming on the show the next few weeks, I have lined up the University of Alabama, Birmingham, with their Dean of Admissions down there, and followed by the University of Michigan School of Medicine, coming down the road pretty soon. And then in August, I've had some people asking me, hey, when are we going to get to hear about Case Western? When do we get to hear about Case? So we'll be doing that episode in August. So stay tuned for that. We'll get that out to you soon. I wanted to wait before we gave you the Case commercial a little bit to get a few episodes in with some other medical schools, but I've been hearing from a lot of listeners that they want to hear about us, so I'm going to get Dr. Maida, the Dean of Admissions, on the podcast with me, and we'll talk all things Case Western. So that's coming up down the road. But today we're going to talk about the University of Iowa Carver College of Medicine and their Director of Admissions. And so let me give you a little bit of background about the University of Iowa, and then we'll talk a little bit about the Director of Admissions, and then we're going to jump right into the interview with the Director of Admissions. So the University of Iowa Carver College of Medicine is located in Iowa City, Iowa. To give you a little idea about where Iowa City is located, they are in the eastern portion of the state, about an hour and a half east of Des Moines and roughly 5 hours directly west from Chicago. It's a large college town sort of setting. The medical school was established there in Iowa City in 1870, and they are looking for students who have a genuine interest in the study and practice of medicine, that show a desire and commitment to serve the public in matters of health, and who have the intellectual and conceptual skills to manage the changing scientific and technological information required by a competent physician in today's world. Iowa is a public institution, and they accept students outside the state of Iowa, but not applicants from Canada, international, or those with DACA status. In 2018, the medical school received 3,871 applications and interviewed 678 applicants for a class size of 152. I think it's worth mentioning that 35% of this entering class, though, were from states outside of Iowa. 51% of their 2018 entering class were comprised of women, and 11% self-identified as underrepresented in medicine. Some statistics about the entering class of 2018, based on the matriculate data, was there were 82% of the incoming students had community service or volunteer experiences. 94% had physician shadowing or clinical observation experiences. 90% had medical or clinical community service or volunteering experiences. 52% had some type of paid medical or clinical employment, and 90% had research or lab experience. The mean GPA for the students that were accepted to Iowa in 2018 was 3.77, with a range of 3.03 to 4.0, and the mean MCAT for accepted students was a 512, with a range of 500 to 526. So there's a little bit of background, a little thumbnail sketch about Iowa Carver College of Medicine. And I will mention too, and the director of admissions mentions this as well in the interview, but I'll tell you now that Iowa is home to a very well-established podcast called The Short White Coat, and a lot of their medical students are on that podcast as well. They bring in guests from other medical schools and other people from the medical world. So check out Short White Coat, or Short Coat Podcast is what it's called. So give that a shot too. I'll also put a link to that on the show site here. But let me tell you a little bit about the director of admissions at University of Iowa, and her name is Kathi Mullenbrook. She's been the director of admissions at the College of Medicine for the past 10 years, and her role entails working with the admissions committee to facilitate a process that utilizes a holistic review of applications and brings in a class that represents a broad diversity of students from a variety of backgrounds and experiences. Before becoming the director of admissions, Kathi was the assistant director of admissions and was responsible for coordinating the admissions interview process. Kathi really enjoys the interactions she has with interviewees and current medical students, which I think you're going to hear throughout our conversation. And she considers her work in medical school admissions to be her dream job, which she's had for the last 22 years. Kathi Mullenbrook is a very sincere and genuine person, and I think you're going to hear that come through our conversation that you're going to be listening to today. At the end of the conversation that Kathi and I have, we're going to dive into some listener questions today about reapplying to medical school, which is a very important topic. So I hope that you check that out, because even if you're not in the reapplication process, it's worth listening to so you can hear what things we discuss if that should have to come down your road in the future. So really important stuff right there. So with that, let's jump right into it with the director of admissions, Kathi Mullenbrook. Kathi, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I've been anxious to have you on here.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here today.
Well, look, from just seeing and reading your bio, you've been doing admissions now for quite a while. Why don't you tell us how you got in? You call this the dream job, and I agree with you. I think this is a dream job. How did you get your dream job?
Well, when I was in college at the University of Northern Iowa, my sisters had got me a work-study job in the admissions office, and I found myself actually following the admissions counselors around and asking them what they liked about their job and what kinds of things they did. So when it came time to graduate from undergrad, I had a double major in psychology and anthropology and a minor in French. And I knew I needed to go to grad school. So I decided to go into student development for college students. And so I came to the University of Iowa and I did that. And my first practicum and then graduate assistantship was at the Academic Advising Center. And I was a pre-med advisor. And I actually worked there for several years.
Oh.
And the University of Iowa Carver College of Medicine actually at the time did not have interviews for their applicants. So they had gone for over 20 years without interviewing applicants, and they decided to reinstate that in 1996. And so I thought, well, I understand the pre-med part of things. I think I could do this job. So I applied and I got to be the first person to coordinate the interview process here. And that's when I was the assistant director of admissions. I also coordinated the research programs for medical students. So it was kind of funny combination of things that I did, but I really, really loved it. And then 10 years ago, the dean of admissions decided to retire. So I came in and got the job and have really loved being in admissions, but it ties clear back to when I was an undergrad and followed the admissions people around. I kept thinking, I really, really, really want to work in admissions. And so this is a perfect place because med students, people who are applying to medical school have thought about it. This is what they want. And I really enjoy seeing them grow and learn through the pre-med process and then be able to apply and to graduate from medical school here. So that is why it's my dream job.
That's outstanding. So what do you find most rewarding about it? Like, now you've been doing it for quite some time.
I really like the variety in each day. Some days I talk to applicants on the phone about prerequisites, or I answer emails about that. Sometimes I'm on a podcast answering questions. Sometimes I get to talk to the applicants when they're here for an interview day. We have a pre-med conference day that we do. We have a second look day that I get to interact with the people who were admitted. So I still get that student contact that I really like. But I also am the person who makes sure that the admissions committee gets all of the information that they need and are able to make a really good decision about filling the class.
Yeah, that's what I'm glad you said that, because that's what I think I like about the variety is what I like about it too. No 2 days are very similar. We're always doing something different, and certainly our admission cycle is always, the cycle of life continues again every, like this time of year. Here we go again, and so it's always moving. It's never very stagnant. Kathi, a lot of our listeners are obviously from the United States, but I found now that we have listeners that are from other parts of the world. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Iowa City?
Okay, so Iowa City is basically a college town, and it has about, I actually looked this up, 75,000 to 76,000 people who live here.
Okay.
But there's also 30,000 students.
Oh, right.
Iowa City is connected to 2 other towns, Coralville and North Liberty. So between those, there's about 120,000 people here in the area. So it's kind of like a city, but it also has lots of the things that you would be looking for as far as great education, fun things to do, a smaller city feel. So you get to do big city stuff, but you still have the safety and the interaction with other people and the ability to go to concerts and go to plays and theater, play at the reservoir or Lake McBride. Lots of different kinds of things that you can do here.
What do you do for fun?
I really have some interesting hobbies.
Yeah.
My sons and I used to raise rabbits for showing.
Kidding.
Yes.
For showing.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And we had Angora rabbits. So those are long-haired rabbits. If you have an Angora sweater, it came from a rabbit. And I actually know how to spin the wool off the rabbit sitting on my lap into yarn.
No way.
Yes. So that's kind of an unusual thing I do for fun.
Yeah.
But I also like to knit and sew and garden and do lots of fun things. I really enjoy being outside, unless it's very cold.
Right, of course. Yeah. I was going to ask you, like, what's something people are surprised to learn about you, but the rabbit.
I think
hobby.
that's it.
that one, I didn't see that one coming.
No.
So this is something you still do with raising rabbits?
I moved to Iowa City 3 years ago, and my sons grew up, so we don't have the rabbits anymore, but we still have a lot of their wool, so I can still spin it.
That's really fun. That's cool. I'm gonna Google. It's Angora rabbit.
Angora.
Okay, I'm gonna look that up when we're done here and see what those little cuties look like.
I do also want to say that in Iowa next week, there's a bike ride across Iowa that happens each year. It's called RAGBRAI, which is the Des Moines Register's annual bike ride across Iowa. And basically what people do is they start on the west side of Iowa. And Iowa is the only state who has 2 borders that are defined by rivers. So the west side is the Missouri, and they dip their back wheel in the Missouri River. And then they drive on a predetermined route with overnight stays for 7 days. And then they end up at the Mississippi River on the east side and dip their front wheel in the river there. And this may sound ridiculous, but about 10,000 people participate in this every year.
I've interviewed people from Iowa who have done this ride. When you said that, I'm like, I remember meeting a couple people from Iowa who've done this bike ride. I'm like, this sounds kind of crazy.
Yeah, people come from all over the world to do it. And they sometimes wear really funny costumes, and they have teams, and they have a big bus that they follows them around and fixes their bikes and things, and they camp in people's backyards, and it's
That's
really
cool.
funny.
It's a big deal.
It is.
Oh, that's really great.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, hey, you know what? Let's dive right into the college, the Carver College of Medicine. What would be so the curriculum's called the New Horizon curriculum. And I'll tell you, you have some great videos on your website that really kind of showcase the highlights of the school. So I think people should check those out, and I'll put links to them on the podcast show site. But why don't you what are some of the highlights of the curriculum? But you would start with the first 2 years. How would you describe it to people when you're meeting prospective applicants that want to know more about the medical school curriculum?
Okay, so our curriculum in the science kind of preclinical time is actually the first 3 semesters. And in the 4th semester, they start their rotations in the hospital.
Okay.
And for the first 8 weeks, there's a course called Foundations of Science that covers almost all of the science that were in prerequisites or that is expected for them to be able to work with in the coming curriculum. So it's kind of a review, making sure everybody's on the same page when they get started. The only class that's a science course that lasts an entire semester is anatomy.
Okay.
And then after Foundations of Science is done, then they start in with mechanisms of health and disease. So they pick a mechanism, cardiovascular system, psych, neuro, some kind of mechanism. And then they go through the science that relates to that mechanism. So you understand how different sciences go into what that mechanism does, how it works, what happens if it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And then at the same time, they're going through 2 other classes that we call strands. One of those is clinical and professional skills. So they get to learn what kinds of things they'd be doing with patients, what kinds of things they'd be looking for in a patient. So case-based learning kind of things that they do. And then there's another strand called medicine and society. And that's about how the society that we live in or across the world could impact that particular patient or that mechanism. So some things are more likely to happen in different parts of the world. Some happen here, some happen to people from different backgrounds or as they get older. So those are the kinds of things that they talk about on that mechanism. So they go through 3 or 4 of those mechanisms in the first 3 semesters, and then they go on to their rotations in the hospital.
Okay.
So I think it's cool because you get a chance to make things work together. Mm-hmm. So you understand all of it rather than just taking one class over time and thinking by the end that, biochemistry is hard or like, where am I doing this? But to be able to actually understand why biochemistry is necessary and how it interacts with those mechanisms and the society, the environment that we
how things are all packaged together.
Yes.
One thing that you mentioned I wanted to kind of highlight was that you mentioned the part of the curriculum where students are learning how to start to care for patients and interview them. And I think that's important for pre-medical students to hear, because I think a lot of times, and I hear this, like they want to know, how quickly can I get out and see patients?
Yes. And we actually start in the very first week. They start shadowing doctors.
Yeah. So I think what people pre-med should hear that we're not just going to put you and throw you out into the wards with very little to no experience. You start off as, like you said, shadowing some physicians, but now you're seeing it through the lens of a medical student. Mm-hmm. Not a pre-medical student. I think that's important because our job is to kind of ramp you up in our curricula so that you learn how to start to communicate with patients. We're not just going to throw you out there with little to no skills in doing that, because that would be, I think, kind of a nightmare for the student and the patient.
And sometimes for the rotation people too.
Yeah. So the first 2 years, how is it? You mentioned case-based work. Is it a combination of case-based and lecture, or is it all kind of lecture? What's that kind of breakdown?
Well, the professional skills class is in small groups. They also have case-based learning, which is in groups of 8.
Okay.
And then we have some lectures. We have flipped classrooms, and our students actually don't all have exactly the same schedule. They might be going to a small group for one class. Another person in their class might be going to a different kind of small group. So they each have kind of individualized schedules. And I think that's really neat. The only issue is if you're not sure where you're going next, you have to know what your schedule says. But I think that it's a really great way for students to feel invested in their own education in this, and to feel like there are faculty members who care about them because they're facilitating the small groups, and being able to interact with students in different areas. We also have the physician assistant students in the College of Medicine, and our physician assistant program is number 1 in the country.
Oh, wow.
There are 25 of those students who actually start out in that very first fall semester with our medical students, and they go through those first 3 semesters with them.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so we already have the interprofessional kind of built in.
Oh, that's great. And then that adds to more the camaraderie too among the students and the PA students. Then they're all probably out, I think socially, I would expect they're all doing things together too, right?
Yes, they are. And they're in our learning communities, which is another part of the educational process, but also being able to fit and have a home base for our students, so they feel like they're connected to the school and to faculty and to students and staff.
Tell us a little more about the learning communities. Is that kind of the student affairs system, or is that a separate thing?
It is the student affairs end of it. So there are 4 learning communities, and it feels kind of Harry Potterish, but they are assigned to a community when they start here. And they stay in that community throughout the entire time that they're here. And that includes the medical scientist training program students plus the PA students. So they're assigned to this community. Each community has co-mayors who are in charge of, making the community run. There are at least 1 social director, there's a treasurer, there's a secretary, and in each community there are now 2 faculty directors. There's a person who's a staff member in the Office of Student Affairs and Curriculum who coordinates one of the semesters, and then there's a support person in each one of the communities. So the students have a lot of help from staff and from faculty, but they also get to run their community and kind of decide which things that they want to do service projects for, things like that. And so it's very much a home base. They leave their lunches in the refrigerator and stand in line at noon to warm up their dinners and hang out together in this learning space. And it's a way for students who are first-year students to interact with second-year students, and third-year students. So they stay in it, they stay connected, and they're able to really share information from year to year.
Oh, that's great. That's really interesting. What about, I was going to ask you, what's kind of a typical week like for, say, a first-year student? I know you said a minute ago that students sometimes have different schedules. Do they come to school at 8:00 in the morning and they're there till 4 or 5, or are they done around lunchtime? What would that kind of look like for an incoming student?
Well, they might have a lecture around 8:00, and then they might have a lab that follows that. They can have a case-based learning session in the morning, and then they all get from 12 to 1 off to be able to have lunch, to have student organization meetings and community meetings. And then from about 1 to 3, maybe 4 in the afternoon, they might have small groups on different days, or a lab section for one of their courses later in the day. They also have something called nest groups, which is just a even smaller group of people within their community that they sit down with a faculty member and make sure that everything's going okay. So they might have a nest group. And once in a while, about a couple of times a semester, they have professional education, where they also bring in pharmacy students and nursing students and dentistry students, and all work together on a case to be able to see what each one of those groups might contribute to the care of a patient. So it's a little bit strange. They'd be going from a lecture to a lab to maybe another lecture to a case-based learning, lunch, and then some afternoon smaller groups. So that's kind of how it looks. We do have exams on Fridays, which the students seem to really like, because it usually leaves them able to really relax on Saturday, hang out with their friends, catch up on their laundry, talk to their parents or significant others. Reconnect. Yeah. And then on Sunday, they're back in and studying and getting ready for the coming week. So they really seem to like having that Fridays done.
Yeah. So on the Friday tests, are they long? I mean, are we talking a couple hours for a test or exam on every Friday?
It's about an hour, and it's only for one class.
Okay.
So they can focus on that one thing.
So it's not like a major exam every week. It's a test in one class a week.
Yes.
So, I think that's a nice approach. And then you get at least Saturday to kind of decompress, and maybe a little bit on Sunday to catch up on things before you get right back after again on Monday.
Yes.
How about clinical? So you're in Iowa City, and the hospitals that are nearby, I have to assume, is the medical center. And are there other hospitals where students are going to in those first couple years to start to get those early clinical experiences? And what types of patients are they seeing? Is there something in particular students are seeing in the Iowa City community?
Okay, so the University of Iowa hospitals and clinics are literally linked to the medical school in the medical education and research facility. So you can get from one end of the medical school to the other end of the hospital without ever leaving the second floor. So it's nice, especially in the winter or if it's raining, to be able to do that and to leave your things in your community and be able to basically go around inside and not lose your gloves and coat and all that stuff in the middle of a lecture. So we utilize the University of Iowa hospitals and clinics heavily because the doctors in the hospital are faculty in the College of Medicine. They are the same.
Okay.
So they're going to be doing a lot of the clinical teaching, but they also come over and are facilitators for the small groups. So they're interacting with students a number of times throughout their stay through medical school. Cool. We also have the Veterans Affairs Hospital, which is actually right across the street from the University of Iowa hospitals and clinics. And a lot of the physicians there are also faculty in the College of Medicine. So our students do rotate through the VA hospital. And then there's another hospital here in town, Mercy Hospital. And they can also have mentors from Mercy Hospital. I know some students have done research with the doctors over there. So there's a real connection with that. But we also have another campus that's in Des Moines.
Okay.
So our students can choose to do rotations in Des Moines. They can choose to do a couple, or they can do an entire year of them.
In the first 2 years? Or is
that's going to be in their rotations later.
Okay, the rotational year, third year.
So, but they can do some of those interactions with the faculty in that first year and a half in Des Moines.
How far away is Des Moines from Iowa City?
About an hour and a half.
Okay, so not too far.
Yeah.
Huh. I noticed in doing some research about Iowa that you have a special tract for rural medicine is a program, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us more about that? And how do students get into that? Do they elect to be in that, or how does that work?
Well, it is a program that's actually funded in part by the state. And so once somebody is admitted, we send them information on the rural track, and they have to apply.
Okay.
And talk about why they're interested in rural medicine. And each year we can accept 4 people into the track.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get set up with a mentor already the summer before and get a chance to meet with them. It could be in any rural community. We have mentors all over the state.
Okay.
But those mentors will come here. They'll get to go out and see the mentors in their own clinics. It's in primary care for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And when they graduate, then they can do their residency anywhere, but it does have to be in primary care areas. And then when they come back to the state of Iowa and practice in a city of under 26,000 in one of those primary care areas, there will be a loan repayment at that
so
point.
it's kind of like a loan forgiveness program in a way?
Yes.
That is cool.
Yes, but we have a lot of people who are interested in rural medicine who want to participate in the kinds of things that those students do. So we have a student group.
Okay.
And they can also be connected with those mentors and get a chance to participate in the lunch sessions and things like that. So
good.
It isn't just restricted to those 4. It's going to be for anybody that is interested in rural medicine.
Are there any other highlights that you wanted to share with people about the first 2 years of the curriculum?
Well, we have something called distinction tracks.
Okay. Yeah. Tell us about that.
And they are in several areas. I forgot to write them all down. But what happens is our students can participate in a number of really great activities throughout those first 2 years. And what we found is after those first 2 years, they wanted to stay connected with their mentors on those projects or in their research or that kind of thing. And so we created distinction tracks. And the first one was in research. So we have this really robust research program for our students. We have an NIH grant that we've had for over 40 years.
Wow.
That funds 32 students in the summertime, and that can be pre-M1s, people who are admitted, want to come here in the summer before they get started, or in the summer after their first year, and they get paid $6,000.
Oh, wow. That's a good stipend.
With a mentor here. And so they do that program. They participate in the research conference in the fall where they present their research. They have a mentor over those 4 years. They write a manuscript at the end. They have to present their research twice during that time. And then they can graduate with distinction in research. And in that case, that goes in the graduation program. It goes on their transcript. It also goes in the letter that the dean sends to the residency programs.
That's important. Yeah.
And it says this person is on track to graduate with distinction in one of these areas. And I'll talk real quickly about the other areas as well.
Yeah.
But what that does is it gives the student a chance to talk about something they're passionate about, and they stand out in the group because this is something they've been working on for 4 years.
Yeah, it sounds really longitudinal.
Yeah, and they get a chance to talk about it. And it really shows that they were able to focus their attention on something if they're really excited about that. And we have service distinction track, global distinction track. There's healthcare management track, humanities distinction. So what did I say? Teaching track. And so I think that's 6 of them. But our students can choose any of those or none of them, or they can participate in activities related to any of them that they want to do. We have had some people who've graduated with 2 distinction tracks.
I was going to ask if students could do more than one, because there's always somebody that wants to.
They do have to
level up.
Exactly. More than 2 makes them seem not very distinct, though. So they need to focus a little bit and choose no more than 2. But there are lots of things that cross over. They might be doing a service track that they're really enjoying working with a certain population, but it might be a global population. And so they can choose which direction they want that to go. So it's a lot of fun for them. They get to do things that they might not otherwise have gotten to do, but they do get to go on global experiences that can last from 6 to 12 weeks.
Wow.
Anytime during those 4 years, but usually in the summer between their first and second, or in their 3rd and 4th years.
Are there particular, for students that are doing that global distinction, are there particular countries that Iowa has partners with where students tend to go during usually that first summer break that you talked about?
We've had these global programs as long as I've been here, and we've had students go pretty much all over the world. Mm-hmm. And we have a full-time person who works with the global programs, completely oversees all of them, including medical Spanish and medical French courses that they hold on Sundays for students. She teaches a couple classes where she brings in speakers, so that's part of the global distinction track. But she knows where all of the connections are. If a student has done Peace Corps or something on that order and has a community they want to go back to, she can make that work out. Otherwise, we've got programs set up all over the world, and they can choose to go to one that they don't have to create the program. They can participate in that. And she requires them to write a paper when they get back that has to be done in a certain amount of time as part of that distinction track. So Robin is an amazing person, and she has traveled all over the world, and she really understands the politics of what's going on. So if something happens not to be going well,
that's important.
She can get them out pretty quickly. So I think that that's something that makes parents and students feel a little bit better about going somewhere remote. Because Robin really knows what she's doing, and she's very, very good at this. And our students, we've had so many students, probably about a third of them, get to go on global trips.
Wow. And just to kind of wrap up the first 2 years here, is there something that you seem to know the students well, and that I get a feeling you kind of know who your students are and interact with them? Is there something that you feel like the students really enjoy most about the first 2 years?
Well, I think it's having the communities, the learning communities that raise funds for different entities around the Iowa City area. It's interacting with students who are in the first and second year, being able to individualize their schedules, and having a staff in the Office of Student Affairs and Curriculum. There's over 35 of us.
Oh, wow.
And so we are always there to help, to answer any questions if something isn't going right, because life happens even while you're in medical school. They have an incredible support system. We also have a medical student counseling service, and we have free tutoring for all of our students, all of them.
Wow.
So they utilize that tutoring very heavily because they can do it in a group setting and have somebody who did well in that course be the facilitator for it, but they can also give them a good idea of where to focus their efforts, or if they don't understand a concept, that person can help them out with it. There can be one-on-one tutoring as well, and our students can be tutors in the future for courses they do well in, and they actually get paid for that. So that's a really nice
nice
for that. But it helps them study for their USMLE, the tutoring because they get a chance to review the material before they go ahead and take that course. So it's a really nice combination of students helping students, but also having a support staff here that is really welcoming and kind and helpful and understanding when things don't seem to be going right. Yeah. We're all here to kind
of wrap your arms around them. And yeah, I always kind of joke sometimes with applicants, like, it's really hard to get in here, but it's kind of hard to get out.
Yes.
Because there's several safety nets that are underneath. And this is not just, this happens obviously at a lot of schools. There's a lot of people that are around you to make sure that if you hit a tough spot, that there are people around you. They're going to kind of swoop in and say, okay, we can help you out. We've seen this before, and we'll help support you and get you what you need to get you back on track. So
I usually tell them, if we admit you, we will graduate you.
Yeah. That's the goal.
That's the plan. Yeah. So it's not like we're trying to weed people out once they're here. We have a really great group of students every year, and we want to make sure that they're successful.
Absolutely. You mentioned USMLE, and we know that this is a hot topic for pre-medical students, medical students, and usually prospective applicants always want to know, how much time do I get to study for step one in your curriculum? Do you have dedicated time? And
yes.
So how does it work at Iowa?
So we actually have them take it after their 5th semester. Which sounds kind of strange, but that's when we get done with the mechanisms of health and disease. Mm-hmm. And it's December and January, so they get time to study. Okay. So dedicated time, not in class or rotations, to be able to study and to do well. Mm-hmm. on it. We have study groups that are held through our counseling service. They get them all set up together and have students who, again, have done well on the exam come in and do the tutoring or facilitate the group studying, give them a good idea of how long they should be studying and kind of what to expect when they get there.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure, again, that if we admit them, that they can get through that USMLE, because it's just really frustrating to see somebody get that far and then not be able to get through that exam. And it's really important to us that they have all the services they need to be able to do well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a high stakes test, and these high stake tests don't go away after you finish the MCAT.
No.
Yeah. So 3rd and 4th year, any highlights you want to share about the 3rd and 4th year?
Well, they start out in their clinical rotations doing the more primary care kinds of things, but because they go in that 4th semester, they get to really have a chance to experience those specialty areas that they might not have gotten to do until it was time to start applying for residency.
Okay.
So this is a way for them to be able to experience some of those things that they think they really want. There are required courses. There are ones that they have to choose between, and then there are electives. And the electives might be global. They might be here. They could be at the VA. There's just a lot of things that they can do to personalize, again, individualize that part of their education. Mm-hmm. So they might be really interested in research as well. So they can continue to work on that and have a mentor to help them through that. So they might have gotten an inkling that they might be interested in a specific specialty earlier. Mm-hmm. And this is a chance for them to build it into their schedule early so they can see if that's really what they want.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that it's a great experience. They can do it all at the University of Iowa hospitals and clinics, but they have a number of different places they can go. And we do have a visiting student program. So we have people here right now that aren't ours. Sure. And we have people out in several different states doing rotations as well. So if it's something that they're really interested in, like emergency medicine, we have a great emergency medicine faculty and program here. But if you're looking for more inner city, that's not our thing. Mm-hmm. So our students can actually go somewhere where they can get involved in that kind of emergency medicine experience. Mm-hmm. But we do a lot of things very, very well. We're highly ranked in a number of our specialties. The ones that start with O are some of our best. So orthopedics, ophthalmology, and otolaryngology are among the top in the country. And so our students know if they stay here, that they're going to get a really great education. But we also do the rural kinds of medicine, primary care very well. So I think one of the best things about choosing Iowa is that you don't have to know what you want when you get here, because we've got a really great way for you to be able to figure that out along the way, because we've got strong programs. And no matter what you choose, we're going to do our very best to get you placed in a top-notch residency spot.
And I think that's what I hope pre-meds hear sometimes, is that they say, well, you're going to, maybe they end up going to Iowa, and maybe they're from another part of the country, and they're, I'm going to be in Iowa for 4 years. But then they get out and meet some of these mentors in these top-notch residency programs, and they want to try to get their claws in you. And the next thing you know, you're in Iowa, you decide, this is really great. I'm going to stick around for another 4 years of training, and maybe you didn't see yourself being in there for more than 4 years, but now you're there for 8 or 10, and maybe end up making that community your home.
Lots of our faculty Our faculty will say that with kind of a confused look on their face when they're introducing themselves to our interviewees. They'll say, well, I came for residency and 20 years later, here I am.
Yeah.
Very happy. So I think that it can be kind of a surprise once you get here, but it is a really great place to live and to raise families. And so I think a lot of those things are things that catch our students and hopefully keep them here longer.
Yeah. Yeah. We always try to keep some of our students with us. You know, they can they have the options of going to other places for the residency training, but boy, we love to keep them in our community and contributing back to the school and things like that.
Yes.
Speaking of community, you mentioned that there's the community distinction or service distinction. How do students that may not be in the service distinction track get involved in the Iowa City community? What are your medical students doing out in the community to be involved? And is there any philanthropy that they're all kind of involved in, or is it just a bunch of different things?
Well, our learning communities were meant to help students collaborate and feel a sense of community. But what we find is that pre-medical students are kind of built for competition. So in a funny way, we let them compete in the learning communities for philanthropy reasons. Okay. So the different communities will have service activity, and the group that raises the most money or the group that brings in the most toilet paper or whatever it is, they get points. So at the end, there's an award to the community with the most points in helping in service in the community in the Iowa City and nearby communities. So we have a very large migrant population and a number of other cultures that have come, and there are pockets of them here. And we want to make sure that our students get a chance to go out and really help them. So we have a mobile clinic that our students can get involved in. And that also includes dentistry and pharmacy and nursing. And they can go out in those communities that are just a little ways away that have a clinic out there on Saturdays and get to see patients who wouldn't otherwise get access to health care. But we also have a fun activity called Press Out Domestic Violence. So there's a bench press competition for the number of lifts that somebody can do. There's a prize for that, or in your age category, or all the surgeons, because they seem to want to win, get together as a team. But the money that they raise goes to our domestic violence intervention program. And for the DVIP, that is the biggest fundraiser they have every year. So all the communities can participate. They can participate as a department within the hospital, or any number of other groups of people can do that. And it's a lot of fun. And it's a way to get that competitiveness out in a way that really contributes to the community.
That would explain the picture of somebody bench pressing on your website.
Yes.
Because I saw there were like 4 pictures, and then I saw a community or something about students, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. You know, kids in a gym, and it was somebody bench pressing. Like, now you've connected the dots. It's a thing. It's a thing. We've kind of tried to touch on all the bases here for your curriculum at Carver. Is there any kind of myths or misconceptions of your school, or things that people maybe don't know about Iowa that maybe you can't find on a fancy website that you'd like people to know about?
Well, I think one of the things that people don't know is that the University of Iowa was the first university to accept men and women on an equal basis when it opened in 1870.
Wow.
So this is a place where equal opportunity lives. And it's something that we're proud of, that we want people to know that we consider diversity to be a really good thing, but it's a very broad definition of diversity.
Sure.
And so that's something that kind of hides on our website, I think. Otherwise, Iowa City may seem like a small town, but there are so many things going on. So to Iowans, it might seem like a big city, but to those coming from other places, I think that it's a really fun place to live with so many things to do to keep you entertained, even during the wintertime. And having one of the biggest research hospitals in the country, teaching hospitals in the country, literally attached to the medical school is a wonderful thing. So I think some of those things get buried on the fancy websites.
Well, Kathi, you've now kind of whet our appetite for the medical school. Now let's talk about how people get in there. Like, so let's kind of start with the screening process. I was doing some reading and found that you don't invite everybody to complete a secondary. So can you kind of walk us through what the screening process is like, and then we'll segue into getting the interview?
Okay, so each year we get almost 4,000 applications, and we have 152 people in our class. So we have to kind of have some minimum standards for getting a secondary application. But of all of those applications, only about 350 are Iowans, so all the rest are non-residents. And so that's a huge pool of people. And in the future, 60% of our class will be Iowans and 40% will be non-residents. So even though there are a lot of applications, it's also a lot of people for a public school.
Sure.
From different states. So we go through those, and it is required to have a 500 or higher on the MCAT to get a secondary application.
Okay, that's good to know.
And there are some minimums on each category. Like I think it's 123 on each of those. Okay. So you'd have to have more than that in other categories, but the lowest it can go on one category is 123. And from there, you get a secondary application. And we do have questions on the secondary application asking you why you're interested in Iowa. It's really nice if you spend some time looking at our websites and understanding Iowa culture a little bit, and looking at what we have to offer as a school to be able to answer that question. We also have a question on what kinds of hardships have you overcome? What kind of challenges have you faced? What kind of talents do you have that would add to the education of the entire class? And Midwesterners are notorious for being humble. So this is usually a really hard question for them, but there are really wonderful things that Midwesterners do every day. They just don't think that they're remarkable. Right. Or challenges they've overcome that you think, well, you just pick yourself up and dust yourself off.
That's just life.
So just talking about a story of something that's happened to them, an illness they might have had, or something that happened within their family, a flood or a fire, or, any number of things that they just don't think are remarkable, you just do that. You just move on. Those are things that say that they have skills that they can share with other people. Something that's happened that they have really learned how to overcome a challenge or ask for help, things like that. So, but it can be, I speak 3 languages, or it could be that I majored in biomedical engineering. And so I have this problem solving background. So there's just some things that they can think about now, maybe before they get to that question and go, oh my gosh, what I'm going to say. So, that is the second one. The third one that we have on ours is to list healthcare experiences and completed hours. So on the AMCAS, those experiences can be projected into the future. And this one is to see what they've actually completed and to talk just a little bit about each one of those experiences. And that gives them a chance from the time that they might have submitted on June 1st to get a follow-up, maybe sending in their application, their secondary application on August 1st. They can talk about what they did this summer.
Yeah, that's good.
And I think that gives them an extra opportunity to add those experiences in there.
Kathi, can I ask you to go back to the first question about on your second year, is kind of like, what's your interest in Iowa? And you had mentioned, people have found things on our website. And if I'm an applicant from a state outside of Iowa, how do I write that response so that it sounds authentic or genuine, that I just didn't go on your website and say, oh, I really like the New Horizons curriculum, really speaks to me, or I like the big hospital it's affiliated with and connected to. How do you make it sound like genuine? What are you looking for when you're looking at that type of essay?
Well, we've seen some cut and paste from the website, so that's probably not the best way to go.
Just you mean cutting and like just from a paragraph or something on the website?
Yes. So don't do that.
Not good. Don't do that. Okay.
But really looking at something that's different about our program, like the distinction tracks, or something that really speak to students who've done research or service, or have done a lot of global work, or even come from a different part of the world.
Okay.
And to be able to talk about how they see themselves fitting into that, or the learning communities and how they can interact with that, or that they might be able to go to Des Moines for a year and do rotations through the non-university hospitals in that area. Maybe get a little more access. They have fewer residents. They have fewer medical students going through there. So you get a little more interaction with the faculty in those areas. So really look at what we have to offer. We've had a couple of people from southern states say they've never seen snow and they'd be really excited to experience it. So we've got that.
So I think what I'm trying to get, so you can be just almost not informal, but just be honest. Like, what is it that attracts you to our institution that you've read? Because I think for a lot of students, medical schools are just, they're websites. You can't go out and visit every medical school that you're interested in. And so all you really kind of know about them is what maybe you read on MSAR or their website. So it doesn't seem very personalized, but if you can try to find what might resonate with you, it sounds like that's what you're kind of looking for in that particular essay.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. So we get a completed application into Iowa. What's the screening process kind of like? What's that look like on the inside?
Well, because we are a public school, the Iowa applicants who have a 3.2 GPA and a 505 on their MCAT automatically get an interview invitation. So we don't do a lot of screening for that because we want to give those Iowans a chance.
Okay.
And for the non-residents, my assistant director and I, as well as two of my processing team members, will go through all of the non-resident applications and look for characteristics that the admissions committee is looking for, and invite people from there for an interview. And we'll probably interview a little over 400 non-residents and probably about 300 Iowans.
That's a good chunk then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It is. So we'll hang on to those applications. We don't reject people. We wait until we have a pretty good feeling of what the pool looks like before we start saying, no, this person probably isn't going to get an interview. But we do try to keep them updated on our application site on that kind of thing. And then we have a rolling phase, and then we have a final pool that we go through from there after the interview is completed.
So let's talk about the interview day. So I get the invitation to come interview at Iowa. What are the interview days like? What can I expect that to kind of look like and feel like? You
will get an invitation that describes everything. So we're trying to get you prepared.
You kind of know ahead of time.
Yes, because we think that the more you know, the less nervous you'll be.
Right.
And we are actually not looking to make people more nervous. We want them to be able to put their best foot forward when they come in for the interview. So we are probably a little disconcertingly nice.
People are probably like, you guys, you can't be this nice. What's your angle?
Yes, but we are, it turns out. So we'll do everything from where you need to park, what kinds of things you need to be thinking about in advance to answer the questions. We also tell them that they're going to get interviewed by 2 faculty members in the College of Medicine who are not on the admissions committee. Mm-hmm. And it's closed files. So they don't have any information other than what state they're from, where they went to school, what their major was, but really no other information that way because
no essay responses?
Nope.
Okay.
We are looking for our interviewers to pick up their interaction with them more than what the admissions committee can see already on the application. So we train our interviewers to do the interview in a very specific way. So we have the first few questions are structured. So they ask a question, the applicant answers, they nod and smile and take notes, and then they go on to the next question, which is a little odd. But what we really feel is important in that is that the applicant doesn't get interrupted. Mm-hmm. They're able to answer the question the way they want to answer it without getting interrupted and taken down a path they didn't want to go. So I think that it's really important to know that the interviewers are volunteers. They've been trained. They're very nice people. We find the nice people. Again, the interviewers will actually come out and get the applicant, walk them back to the room, talk to them about whatever they might, introduce themselves, offer to pour a glass of water so that the applicant doesn't have to shake and pour it themselves. Yeah. We make the interviewers pour the water. So if there's an accident, that's on the interviewer.
It's the little things.
It is the little things.
Little things that count.
Exactly. So then they explain what the interview is going to be like. It's 25 minutes. Once they get through those 3 structured questions, it goes into a regular open give and take. And so the interviewers who've probably been biting their tongues saying, I really want to know more about that experience that you mentioned, or just find out more about them, the applicant can ask the interviewers questions. It's a really nice give and take kind of an interview, and it lasts 25 minutes. After that, or before, depending on how many people are there that day, we also have a case-based learning session for half of the interviewees. So we have about 15 interviewees each day, and it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, pretty much from September till the end of January.
I'm with you on that one.
And so they get a chance to meet a 4th-year medical student who is facilitating the case-based learning, and again has been trained, and just get an idea for where the 4th-year student is, because usually at that time they're going through their interviews too. And so it's kind of fun to be able to talk to them about where they're at. They get a chance to see what a class is like, and then we get a chance to see how they interact.
Okay, so this is an observed interaction. Yes. Okay, so they're doing a mock case that kind of like what you would do if you were a student at Iowa, facilitated by a 4th year, and you're observing and doing some evaluating?
Yes. And that's done by the facilitator. There are 2 facilitators. So one is observing and the other one is facilitating. And so the kinds of things they're looking for have nothing to do with whether or not they get the right answer, because we actually never know whether they got the answer at the end.
Okay.
What we're trying to figure out is, do they pay attention to the group? Is somebody just so excited that they are just running over everybody all the way through? Or could they back up and say, oh, I need to monitor my behavior here and invite others into the conversation? I think a lot of times people are nervous that they don't know anything, but these are cases that don't require that. I mean, there are things that your parents or your sister or your grandparents have encountered. So a lot of times you have more experience on it than you think you do. But the facilitator is there to add in the information that you need. So it really is kind of, what would you be looking at for this? And are you good at saying, I think that's a really good idea? What if this, being able to play off the others in a really good group setting? And the reason for this session is because a lot of our classes are group settings, and we need them to be comfortable in that kind of a setting. So usually it goes really well and people love it. It's fun. They forget themselves and just have a great time with it. So both of those things, the interview and the case-based learning, go into it. But we also have Amy Ahern is my assistant director, and she is phenomenal. And she'll come in and tell them what to expect for the day. And then we'll have someone from financial aid. And we have one senior associate dean and 3 assistant deans. And each interview day, one of them will come in and talk to the applicants. Cool. So it's really nice to have actual deans taking time out of their day to come in and talk to them. And then I come in and talk to them and kind of explain what happens after that day, like where the application process goes. But I'm also there to say, if you just went on a tour with a medical student and you've got blisters from your new shoes, we have Band-Aids. Yeah. Things like that. Yeah. Again, to make sure that when they walk into that interview room that they are feeling their best and not worried about something little. So it's important to us that they feel that way. Yeah.
I'm glad that you mentioned, I always like to know like what your role is in the interview day, and will prospective, interviewees get to meet you? Because I think that this interaction that you and I are having kind of it really personalizes you. And maybe someday there'll be some applicants who come your way and say, I feel like I've met you before because I listened to your podcast. You listened to this interview. And
I hope so.
Yeah. I want to go back a minute ago. You mentioned something I think it's like pre-med advice gold about the observations that are taking place in that case-based session. I hope people really keyed in there to hear that whether it's an observed experience at Iowa or at another medical school, what they're looking for. It's not, like you said, to get the right answer. It's, can you modify your behavior? How do you interact with others? How are you communicating and maybe picking up on nonverbal cues from each person in a group setting, because that's so important to us.
It is. It's very important. And I don't know that everybody really understands that's what it is. I think they think that we're trying to actually determine whether or not they know stuff.
Exactly. And I wanted to highlight that so that if somebody was listening and they zoned out for a second, that at least I can maybe get them back in with this kind of take a pause here and hear that again, because that was pre-med advice gold. I'll say it again because that's really important. I can't stress that enough, how important that is to medical schools that when you're doing those observed experiences. So any general advice for applicants coming to interview at your school that you want people, you would like them to know about before they come to your school?
Well, again, in that invitation to set up an interview, we give them a lot of information so they can go out and kind of look up how they might want to interview or get ready for an interview, if they can get experience in their college or university at the Career Center, just basic help with that kind of interview setting. Now, we're pretty good about things like when you have a new suit and there's a tag on the sleeve. Yeah. We'll help them get that off. So they're really ready and working on that kind of thing. But thinking about their experiences. So in our interview, it isn't just having an answer, or if they said, what characteristics would you look for in a doctor? If they give them a list, that's not what the interviewers are looking for. Having a story that they've experienced in an interaction with the doctor themselves, or when they were shadowing a physician or a family member, those kinds of things are going to make it, first of all, easy to remember the answer rather than trying to memorize an answer. And it makes it personal, and you can feel more enthusiasm coming from them. So usually what I tell people, even like in their second year of undergrad, is that when they do a healthcare experience or they shadow a physician, or even if they're working in a restaurant, go home at night and write something down in a journal that happened that day, that you just thought about, wow, I didn't see that coming. Or, I would like to interact with patients one-on-one, or something like that. So when they get to the time when they need to write a personal statement and they need to answer interview questions, they can go through those stories and really make a big picture out of it, rather than worrying about all the tiny little details. And that's really what we're looking for in our interview, but we're also looking for it in the personal statement as well.
I think, I have been emphatically nodding my head up and down for the last 45 seconds during that response. That is more, I hope people heard, that's pre-med gold. That is just, you absolutely nail, helping people understand what we're looking for in an interview, not just the list of things, like you said, the sample question about what characteristics or attributes do you think physicians possess or are important, but really personalize it with some kind of stories and keep a journal. I hope people do that. That's the way you do it.
Yes.
So you can remember those things. It's the way you do it.
Well, when you sit down to write that personal statement, if you haven't written those things down, you feel like, I know I did stuff.
What was it? Oh, I can't remember.
Yeah, but this way it's right there in front of them, and they're able to build a picture of who they are and how they got there and why they want medicine.
Love it. I love it. Okay, so after the interview, we go to admissions committee, decisions are made, and they're sent out, I believe, on a rolling basis. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So I have an admissions committee that has 30 members on it. Nobody in the admissions staff votes.
Mm-hmm.
We facilitate the process. We make sure that they have what they need. But there are 25 faculty members in the College of Medicine from different departments, and they might be clinical assistant professors, they might be full professors, they might have a PhD and do research and work with medical students through that path. So they're the ones, those 25 are from the university. We have one physician from the surrounding area who's not with the university. And then we have 4 medical students, and they are elected by their peers to be on the committee. So it's really nice to know that those students have really worked hard to get there, that they wanted to be able to do this, that the faculty members have volunteered and understand the time commitment involved, because it's huge. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And these people are completely dedicated to doing a holistic review, looking through the whole application. But because they come from those different backgrounds, we can't really make them decide which one thing they all think is most important. Mm-hmm. But we do a survey every other year and send it out to all faculty and administration, asking them what characteristics they think that the committee should look for. And every single year for the last 20 years, the number one attribute is moral character. Oh, yeah. So that isn't grades or MCATs. Mm-hmm. It's actual moral character. Are you a good person? Will you help people when you get the chance? Those kinds of things. Are you honest? Do you have integrity? That's what they're looking for most. Yeah,
I hope people heard that. It wasn't like the top MCAT score. It wasn't 4.0 GPA. It was moral character. That's great.
So those on the rolling phase, we will over-admit on the seats for the non-residents, because we know that we will lose some of those when they get admitted to other schools. For Iowans, we always keep about a third of the class open on the rolling.
Okay.
And then when we get to the end of January, everybody who was interviewed but not admitted on the rolling phase goes into something we call our final pool. And again, we keep the residents and non-residents separate. They're never in competition with each other, just for the seats that go to Iowans and the seats that go to non-residents individually. So then we randomly assign applications to 5 of our people on the admissions committee. So each applicant gets read by 5 different people. and they don't talk to each other. They just go through their individual group of people and rank order their Iowans and their non-residents, or give them scores on their holistic review. Then that all goes into a computer program that gives us a Z-score and rank orders the Iowans, rank orders the non-residents. And then our committee meets again in March and fills the Iowa part with the top people in the class or in the rank ordered list. And then we have 100 people on the alternate list. I'm sorry, for Iowans, it's 50. Mm-hmm. For non-residents, we'll even add more people in through the final pool, and then we'll have 100 people on our alternate list. And every school does it differently, and it's very confusing. You get here on an interview day and we're trying to explain this and people kind of glaze over. So it's something that we will try to explain on the secondary application on the electronic one, so they can go in and look and remember what each school told them, but what we specifically do. And we're happy to answer questions, but there's not really a way for them to send a letter of intent.
Yeah, that's my next question.
Yeah, it's not really something that we have the capacity to handle. So we don't usually accept those into the application.
Applicants will be told where they are in the rank order.
Yes.
Okay, so if I'm 14, I can't send a letter of intent and say, will this bump me up to 4?
Right.
Okay. So I just have to just kind of wait it out and see if we get down to 14.
All of those final decisions go out before March 15th. So they know if they've been admitted, they're on the alternate list and what number, or if they're not admitted.
Okay.
So on that alternate list, if they're on it, we're going to ask them if they want to remain on the alternate list, because they may have been admitted somewhere else. Yeah. And that gives somebody else a chance to move up. And it actually moves up pretty much in real time, though I do tell applicants that it really updates at 3:00 in the afternoon. So the reason to just hit refresh.
Yeah. So. Somebody's not just sitting there, refresh.
But they do know. Yeah. And the new system that we're going through this year with the plan to enroll and commit to enroll has been really chaotic, kind of, and it's a learning experience for us. So we're just kind of playing it by ear this year. Hopefully next year we'll have a better idea of how that's going to go compared to in the past. We've been able to look at, how many other schools were they admitted to and that kind of thing. But in this case, we're just going with the flow.
Yeah, it's a little different. Yeah, it's a little different process this year. Any final thoughts about the admissions process at Iowa you want to share? I feel like we kind of touched on a little bit of everything, and your responses have been just clearly your experience just kind of oozes out for the advice you're giving people.
Well, I think that our committee looks for different things, again, based on their own backgrounds, but it is important to have healthcare experience, to volunteer your time for somebody when you have the opportunity to do that, to give back to your community when you can. And that can be as simple as being a soccer coach for 6-year-olds. If it's something you love to do, take some time out and help with something. Shadowing is important, I think, in part because they want to know that you have an idea of what a doctor does and how they interact with patients. So it's hard to get now. Shadowing experience is not easy anymore. And so we're pretty lenient. Sometimes being a scribe can do something with that. Sometimes volunteering in the ER can give you a chance to sit in with the doctor, while they're working with the patient. That kind of thing might work, in spite of not just being a shadowing experience. We like research, but it's not required. I think science and technology are moving forward so fast that really, rather than memorizing things, we want our students to be able to read a journal article and know if it was well written, did they have good methods, were the statistics on spot, or is this a questionable thing? You may not change your practice based on that. But being able to sort through all of that information is going to be something that each one of them is going to have to do in the future. It's never going to get slower. So those are important things. Having really great letters of recommendation is important. So making sure that you ask somebody who knows you well and is able to talk about not just your grade in the class, but your interaction with other people, your ability to handle ambiguity, research that crashes, are
you resilient?
Yes. So those are the kinds of things that we want in that. Make your personal statement personal and why you want medicine. I think a lot of times people say, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this, but it doesn't tell the story.
Yeah.
So those are the things that I think the committee is looking for.
Let me ask you, we're going to get to listener questions here in just a second to kind of wrap things up. But you mentioned shadowing can be hard to get and sometimes hard to find. And I got a question from a listener named Jonah from College of William and Mary. He just emailed me the other day and he said, I got a job as a scribe in an ER. When I'm going to put this on my application, should I classify it as clinical experience or shadowing?
I think it's clinical because they're getting paid.
That's what I said. Good. There's some consistency.
But they can certainly mention that they, sit in with the doctors and that those. Sometimes what I'll ask them is if they follow the same doctor or if it just whatever day they get there, they're assigned to a different doctor, because then you have to learn different people's styles. Yeah. And that gives them a little bit more of an understanding of how different doctors interact with patients. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, okay, good. So I don't think, but I do think in a way, whether you classify as clinical or physician shadowing, it's sort of splitting hairs a little bit, but I do think since you're getting paid for it, you might want to classify it as employment clinical experience. Yes. But then you can talk in the explanation about what it is, what your role was and what you did and what did you take away from it. Yeah.
I also think, I just thought of this, in the top 3 most meaningful, try to have a healthcare experience in there. Yeah. I think that sometimes people miss that opportunity.
Because they give you so much more space, like 1,350 characters to go in a little more depth. And I think that that's important too, to pick one of those should be some type of health related or medically related experience. To just tell us more about your interests and your passion for doing this. That could be a really missed opportunity. Yes. Do you want to jump into listener questions?
Sure.
Okay. Do you have them in front of you? I'll start off and ask you one. Okay. So this one is from, I think it's Kiyu. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. She's from University of Southern California. And Kathi, she says, some school, the theme today, we're talking about reapplying to medical school. So these questions here are all about reapplying, and Kathi and I are going to kind of share our thoughts on this. So Kiyu from USC says some schools have a reapplicant essay in their secondary applications, while other schools do not, but they don't have a specific space for discussing a reapplication. Do we suggest that she should use is there anything else you'd like to let the admissions committee know about you type of essay in secondaries to talk about that she's reapplying, or just not mention it at all?
Well, we fortunately are one of the schools that has a question on the secondary if they're reapplying. Okay, good. We ask them what they've been doing to strengthen their application. So we specifically want to see that they've been addressing those weaknesses that might have been in their application. I do also want to say that we offer, for those people who are not admitted, we offer to have them call in. We make an appointment so we're able to look over the application in advance. But call in and ask us, sometimes they come in if they're here, but ask us what it is the committee saw. And we are really good at looking at both the strengths and the weaknesses. So they know what they're doing right, and they're able to work on the things that maybe need the strengthening the most. And so we tell them to put that in that essay. What is it that you've done? And especially if they came in and talked to one of us. Mm-hmm. So that's a way to really get a good idea of where your application is lacking. However, that is only at the University of Iowa. Yeah. So if you're applying to another university with a different mission, those strengths and weaknesses might be different. Mm-hmm. So we are happy to explain that to them, but we also want them leaving not feeling crushed with nowhere to go. We want to make sure that they know that they do have strengths in their application and how they can kind of work with those to do better the next time.
Mm-hmm. What would you recommend for applicants applying to other medical schools that may not have a specific question? Should they give a nod do you feel they should give a nod that they're reapplying to medical school? I think what some students don't understand is if you're reapplying and you've added new schools to your list that you didn't apply to previously, they won't necessarily know that you're reapplying. But the schools that you may be reapplying to, we see that indicator in AMCAS that the student's reapplying. So what do you think about that?
I think they should address it somewhere, because sometimes they address it in the personal statement, but then they don't say anything anywhere else in the application that they're reapplying. And we're wondering, they're reapplying here, but not really, because they never applied here in the first place. So I think that if they do have it in their personal statement, they probably should say, I'm reapplying. If they put it in the secondary, we also ask them, if you haven't been in school for the last year, and this is only for reapplicants, what have you been doing? Mm-hmm. And so that's where they can talk about reapplying and how they strengthen their application.
So I think the takeaway here is that you and I are saying is, I don't think it's, I do think you should give it, we think you should give a nod to it someplace and let people know, whether it's in a school specific essay or some other kind of, tell us if there's anything else we didn't capture yet, here's a space for you to write that. I think it's okay to give a nod to it. I believe the statistic, and I emailed AMCAS today to find out, and I don't think I've heard back yet, but I remember looking at some data a few years ago, like almost 25% of the application pool consists of people that are reapplying to medical school.
Yes.
Have you heard something similar? Is that a figure that sounds kind of close?
I just saw it in something they sent out to us.
I know. But anyway, what I want people to hear is that there's no shame in reapplying to medical school.
No.
It's a really competitive process, and sometimes it just doesn't work out. So there's no shame. So give a nod to it, because you won't be the only person in our pool that's reapplying to medical school. We see it all the time.
Yes.
All right. Do you have a question for me?
I do. Sarah from Amherst College asked, I've heard and read varying opinions on rewriting essays for my second application to medical school. It felt, and I was told by some admissions people, that they were good essays. Should I completely rewrite my essays for the next application?
I would lean toward, yes, you should at least rephrase some things in your application essays. If you feel that, if you were told that, boy, these are really good essays, they were just another part of your application that just wasn't, that needed to be shored up or just wasn't strong enough for us in this first time. But the essays there wasn't anything wrong with them. But I do think you should rephrase some things in those essays, so it doesn't look like you just cut and paste from the previous one. Because I'll tell you, and I bet you do this too, Kathi, if we see a reapplicant, we tend to go back and look at the previous application.
Yes.
If we have it in our database, to go and compare, like, well, what's changed since the last time?
Yes.
And yeah, go ahead.
Well, that's what we tell them. We say, if you're reapplying, you should update it. You should say, this is what I've been doing, and this is what I've learned, and this is why I still want to be a doctor. These reasons are keeping me motivated. And so we want, even though it might be beautifully written, they can write another beautifully written.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah. And
it's not easy.
It can make you look lazy.
Yes.
That you didn't take the time. You're like, oh, well, they told me these were good. These were fine. So I'll just cut and paste. And I think some people might perceive that as being lazy or not as interested. You're just kind of going through those steps again to try to get in the medical school.
Well, I've been on panels like at the UC Davis AMSA.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
And they've asked questions like this, and I've seen the entire group of panelists all nodding as one of us says, you should rewrite this. So I'm pretty sure we're speaking for a larger group.
I agree. Okay, I have a question for you. Robert from Portland State University says, I was unsuccessful last year in applying to medical school and have enrolled in a master's program to strengthen the academic portion of my application. Should I reapply now? Like, I guess he means this cycle, or wait until I complete my master's program to reapply?
Well, this actually happened at UC Davis as well, this question, and people were all nodding, wait until you have the grades.
Yep.
Because otherwise they're just not going to show up. We don't know how the master's program is going. Lots of times the master's program will write a recommendation and they won't know you yet. So it's okay with us if it's a 2-year program, if they apply after the first year.
Yeah.
But if it's a 1 year, just wait.
Yeah, I want applicants to know that once you click submit in AMCAS, it's like set in stone. You can't update it with new grades periodically throughout the semester. And I've had, and I'm sure you've received this too, applicants say, hey, I'm in a master's program. Can I send you my transcripts at the end of the first semester, basically December, January, and add that to my application? And I feel like at that point, it's way too late in the process.
Yes.
And yeah.
And we really want to know that they're capable of that work at a master's level. So we're more confident in them. So we allow updates to come in December and January, but they're not on the little graph that AMCAS sends us with the trend and with the GPA that's going to show up in that. So our committee members have to go back and look, and it actually is going to hold up their application. It wouldn't get looked at until later. Yeah. Because we're waiting for those grades to come in.
I guess my other thought on this, if I could add one, is that, look, if you're going to spend the money, and this is probably not a free master's program that Robert's doing. No. If you're going to spend the money and spend the financial outlay and the emotional outlay, and to do this, then let it work for you and apply later, so you can show that I had to go and do some academic redemption, and I got a 4.0 in the first year, or over the course of 2 years. You're making a big investment. Let it pay off that way too.
And let them write a letter.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah, and some of those programs have other opportunities like shadowing or healthcare experience or research.
Oh, great point.
That I think is really going to help them. So what I usually tell people who are wavering on this, should I apply this year? Should I apply next year? Put in your very best application. Yep. Don't do it fast. Don't do it this year. If your very best one will be next year. So it's a lot of money. It's a lot of time invested. Really, you want them to see who you really are and what you're capable of, and your interest in their school and that kind of thing. So I think that's better for them.
I know reapplying's tough, and that's a tough conversation to have with applicants when sometimes you're having these meetings with them. And I kind of hesitate sometimes that unless they applied just super late last time, like they submitted on the deadline for their secondary in December, and that's kind of the only thing they really need to fix, then I would say, okay, reapply next spring and just apply earlier. But if it's something like academics or in that vein, then I think you're going to need a little more time. You just can't go and throw out another application the following cycle, because not much will have changed.
Right. And that's what the panelists at UC Davis were all nodding and saying, send in the best one with the changes that are visible rather than ones that you're going to update.
And I know it means another year or two for students when this conversation comes up. These are not usually easy conversations, but gosh darn it, if you're going to be a physician the rest of your life, you may look back after 40 plus years of a career and go, I was so worried about that 1 year or that those 2 years. You might not even remember you had to do that.
And I've had a lot of students come back and be on panels for me and say to pre-med students, that year off was one of the best of my life.
Yes.
I just got a chance to breathe and be myself. I got motivated to do what I needed to do. Mm-hmm. And it was so much easier to apply, once I was out of school, because so many other things were being juggled in the process.
Yeah. Oh, we're singing the same song here. Yep. How about one more question? Do you have one for me?
I do. Stone from Binghamton University says, in evaluating someone who is reapplying to medical school, how much does a high master's GPA, like above a 3.85, help admissions committees forgive a low undergrad GPA, like a 3.3?
Well, that's the academic redemption we're looking for. I would say that we want to see that. So the undergraduate GPA, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. Like it is what it is. And now your academic redemption period is now in the master's program. So we want to see that you're excelling there, that you're proving that I can handle the hard science courses that would be analogous to a medical school kind of level of rigor in curriculum. So I think we try to put this stuff into context. And if for some reason, while you're an undergrad, there was something that was occurring that prevented you from getting better grades, then tell us, help us connect the dots. And that's where writing about it in essays or in sharing that information can help us connect the dots, whether you had to work a lot during the week to help put yourself through school, or, life throws curveballs and it's never at the best time usually. So if that something came up in your personal life that really kind of took away your focus, then we want to know those things because it puts context in there. So what do you think, Kathi? Are we nodding? Is the panel nodding with me?
The panel is nodding again. We do have that question about obstacles you've overcome, and that's a great place for them to write about something that happened as an undergrad that kind of crashed. If things didn't go well, we're hoping that they happened a little bit earlier and that there's an upward trend in the grades as time went on. We don't get to time things that happen. So if it does happen later, then it's absolutely necessary for the committee to see that master's degree, but also understand what happened in the midst of it. So you've got your time management skills back, you're feeling better, you're ready to go. That information is really what they're going to be looking for. So yes, the graduate GPA matters, unless your science GPA was really low and your graduate degree is in public health. Because that is
glad you mentioned that. Can you say more about that?
Well, usually what we'll tell people is whether it's their science, their not science, or their total GPA, that is an issue for the committee. So we tell them, this is one standard deviation below the mean of the people we admitted. And we can show them that graph. So that can be kind of a visual for them to really understand what's going on. But we would want them to take graduate courses in science if the science GPA is low. And I think that's usually the one that most of us are concerned about, is the sciences, because again, we don't teach biochemistry anymore. We don't teach those one semester classes that would allow people to catch up over a semester. We have that 8-week foundations course, and they're going to get hit really quickly with it. So we want to make sure that they really know it and understand it and are ready to go.
One other thing I want to mention with regards to Stone's question, and I think it may not be clear to some listeners, that the undergraduate GPA is a separate, if you will, line item than the graduate GPA. In AMCAS, they don't give you an overall academic history GPA. They're separated. So it's not like, okay, well, I didn't do so well in undergrad, I'll do a big time graduate program and that will boost my overall GPA. It doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. So as I said earlier, whatever happened to undergrad, it happened. You can't go back and really fix it. So that's with there's separate kind of line items that we're looking for, and we're looking at. That's the way that AMCAS breaks it down for us.
Yes.
Wow, this has been a great chat. Any final thoughts, Kathi, about reapplying? Or I think wow. Anything else that you would share?
I would like to kind of give a plug for our Short Coat podcast.
Yes.
So the title is Broadcast from the Amazing and Intense World of Medical School. And it's theshortcoat.com. And we have medical students who come in and talk about things. They talk about current issues in healthcare. They come in and talk about what they did as a pre-med that really kind of enriched their application. There are all kinds of subjects on it, and it's a lot of fun to listen to, but it's also very helpful to our students. And it's part of our humanities and writing program, which is a very unusual program in medical school. So
I didn't know that those were tied together like that.
Yes, they are. And we have a conference in the fall. The Examine Life Conference is coming up, where people from anywhere can come, and for a day or for 2 or 3 days. But there's a lot of humanities, plays, music, those kinds of things that tie into humanism and medicine. So It's a great conference. I love to go, and I don't have a degree in medicine, so.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned the Short Coat podcast, because I was going to somewhere in this interview get it in there, whether it's in the introduction or here. I'm glad you mentioned it here at the end. I'll put links to it on the show site so that people can find it there too. Or you can just search for it in iTunes or Google it, and it comes up. It's a very, very popular podcast.
Yes,
they've been doing it a long time.
Yes, and sometimes our applicants come on interview days and want to meet Dave Etler. Like, I just really want to meet Dave.
Yeah, the guy's famous. It's cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Kathi, this has really been an enjoyable conversation today. I want to thanks for coming on and giving us some of your time. Your experience as a former pre-health advisor is very evident in kind of how things have tracked through your work now in admissions. And so the panel is nodding up and down at all the information you've shared with us today. So I really appreciate you coming on.
Well, thank you for asking me.
Oh, well, this has been great. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Bye.
Boy, doesn't Iowa sound like just a gosh darn nice place. I want to thank Kathi Mullenbrook for sharing so much of her time with us today so that we can learn more about the University of Iowa Carver College of Medicine. I certainly enjoyed hearing it, and I hope you did too. Just want to remind you that, we have a lot of schools coming up down the road, so continue to follow this podcast on Spotify and subscribe on iTunes. Leave a comment if you would, please. It's helpful with the iTunes algorithm to get this out there so more people can find it. And the more people I think this can reach, the more people we're going to be able to help, because we're all in this together here to hopefully get you to be a successful medical school applicant. So with that in mind, I want to thank you all again for listening, and I'll see you next time, everybody. Thank you.